All right, welcome to the deep dive. I think it's fair to say we all kind of want that secret sauce, right? That thing that takes us from just okay to absolutely crushing it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, who wouldn't want to figure out that shortcut?
Exactly. So today we're digging into a book that's practically a blueprint for that. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I'm not talking about just skimming a summary or listening to some random dude on YouTube. We're going deep.
Absolutely. We're talking about really unpacking these habits, understanding why they work, and most importantly, figuring out how they can work for you right here, right now. No waiting.
Yeah, exactly. Like practical application, right?
Practical application, that's the key.
So let's kick things off with habit 1. Be proactive. Sounds simple enough, right?
It does, but it's more than just, taking initiative. It's about flipping the script. Instead of reacting to things, you're choosing how you respond. You're in control.
Think about it. When something goes wrong, what's your first thought?
Right, like, is it, ugh, why me? Or this always happens.
Totally.
Right.
That's reactive, right?
Totally. And what Covey's saying is that instead of being like a puppet, controlled by these external forces, you got to be the puppeteer.
I like that. So how do we make that shift?
Well, it starts with awareness. So next time you're in a tough spot, stop
Hmm.
and just ask yourself, what can I do about this? Maybe you can't change the situation, but you can choose how you react to it.
Right. Like you always have a choice, even if it's just choosing your attitude.
Exactly. And that's huge because it puts you back in the driver's seat. It's about being intentional, not just letting your emotions dictate your actions.
Okay, so we're proactive, we're in control. Now what?
Well, now we need a roadmap. That's where habit 2 comes in. Begin with the end in mind.
I love this one. It's like you don't just start driving without knowing where you're going, right?
Precisely. It's all about having a clear vision for your life. What do you want to achieve? What kind of person do you want to be? Really taking the time to define your goals and values.
And that can feel kind of overwhelming, right? Like where do you even start?
Right. But it doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. Start small. Maybe write down a few long-term goals. Don't overthink it. Just get it out of your head and onto paper.
And then what?
Then try to really visualize those goals.
Mm.
What will it feel like to achieve them? What will your life look like? The more vivid that picture, the more motivating it becomes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like you're creating a mental map to guide you.
Exactly. And another really powerful tool is creating a personal mission statement, like just a few sentences that capture your core values and the impact you want to make on the world.
So we've got our direction, we know where we're headed. Now, how do we actually get there?
That's where habit 3 comes in. But first things first. It's about ruthlessly prioritizing your time and energy.
Because we all feel that pressure, right? Like there's just not enough time to do everything.
And everything feels urgent.
Yeah. But Covey's point is that not everything that's urgent is actually important.
Right. It's about understanding the difference between those two. Like, just because your phone's buzzing doesn't mean it's contributing to your long-term goals.
So how do we actually prioritize effectively?
Well, there's this super helpful tool called the Eisenhower Matrix. You basically categorize everything based on whether it's urgent, important, or both.
Okay, break that down for me.
All right. So the first quadrant is for things that are urgent and important. Like, these are the things that you absolutely have to deal with right now.
Right, like crises.
Exactly. Deadlines that are about to hit, those kinds of things.
Okay. What about the second quadrant?
That's for things that are important but not urgent. So these are the things that contribute to your long-term goals, but they don't have an immediate deadline.
Like planning and strategizing.
Exactly. Relationship building, personal development, things like that.
Okay, got it. So what about the stuff that's urgent but not actually important?
Ah, that's the tricky one. This is where we get sucked in. Those interruptions, those pointless meetings, those favors that people ask you to do that really don't move you forward.
Or like they feel urgent in the moment, but they're not actually contributing to anything meaningful.
Exactly. And the key here is learning to delegate those tasks. Or, even better, eliminate them altogether.
Right, like say no more often.
Yes. Say no to the things that aren't taking you where you want to go.
And then there's that last quadrant, right? The stuff that's neither urgent nor important.
Oh yeah, the time wasters.
Mm,
Social media scrolling, Netflix binging.
yeah.
All the things that we do when we're procrastinating.
So for our listeners, I think the key takeaway here is to really be honest with yourself about where you're spending your time.
Yeah. And to make sure that you're dedicating enough time to those important but not urgent activities,
Mm.
because that's where the real magic happens.
It's like investing in your future self.
Exactly. And another thing to remember is that what's important should be guided by your end in mind, right? That vision we talked about in habit 2.
Right. Your goals and values should be the compass that helps you determine what truly deserves your time and energy.
Absolutely. It's all about alignment.
Okay, so we're proactive, we have a vision, we're prioritizing. Now let's talk about habit 4. Think win-win. This one really resonates with me because it challenges that whole idea that life is a zero-sum game.
Yeah, that scarcity mindset. Like if I win, you have to lose.
Right, and Covey's arguing that there's a better way, that we can actually create situations where everyone benefits.
And it's not just some idealistic, fluffy concept. It's actually incredibly practical. Because when you approach things from a win-win perspective, you build stronger relationships, you foster trust, and you create a more collaborative environment.
Okay, so how do we actually put this into practice, like in a negotiation, for example?
Well, instead of going in with an adversarial mindset, you try to understand the other person's needs and perspectives, and then you look for creative solutions that satisfy both parties.
Right. It's about looking for that third alternative, that solution that's better than what either of you initially proposed.
Exactly. And it might not be immediately obvious, but if you're both committed to finding a win-win, you can often come up with something truly innovative.
I think the key here is that it shifts the focus from competition to collaboration.
And ultimately, that leads to more sustainable and fulfilling outcomes for everyone involved.
Okay, so we're thinking win-win. We're building strong relationships. Now let's talk about habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
This one's all about communication. And it starts with recognizing a pretty common human tendency.
Which is?
We often listen with the intent to reply. We're already formulating our response in our heads before the other person's even finished speaking.
Oh, totally guilty of that.
We all are. But effective communication requires us to do the opposite. It requires us to actually listen, to really try to understand the other person's perspective before we jump in with our own.
It's about being present in the conversation, right?
Exactly. It's about listening with your ears, your eyes, and your heart. Picking up on not just the words, but the emotions, the body language, the whole context.
So how do we become better listeners? Like, what are some practical tips?
Well, first, resist the urge to interrupt. Let the other person fully express themselves before you jump in.
Easier said than done sometimes.
I know, right? But even just being aware of that tendency can make a big difference. And then before you offer your own thoughts, try to summarize or paraphrase what you've heard.
I say something like, so it sounds like you're feeling.
Exactly. It shows that you've been paying attention, and it gives the other person a chance to clarify if you've misunderstood anything.
And that simple act of reflecting back builds trust, right?
Absolutely. And it shows that you genuinely care about understanding their perspective.
Which then makes them more likely to listen to you in return.
It creates a much more open and collaborative dialogue.
Okay, so we're understanding each other, we're communicating effectively. Now let's talk about habit 6, Synergize. This one's all about the power of teamwork, right?
Exactly. It's the recognition that when people work together effectively, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Like 1 + 1 = 3.
I love that analogy. It's like, think about a really great band. Each musician is talented individually, but when they come together, something magical happens.
Right. And that magic comes from synergy. It's about valuing differences, leveraging diverse perspectives, and creating an environment where everyone feels safe to contribute their unique talents and ideas.
So how do we foster more synergy in our lives, like in our teams, in our relationships, in our communities?
First, you have to be willing to let go of the need to always be right. To be open to other people's ideas, even if they're different from your own.
It's about being curious, right?
Yeah.
Like genuinely interested in understanding other perspectives.
Exactly.
Mm.
And then you have to create a space where people feel comfortable sharing those perspectives. A space where there's no judgment, where everyone's voice is heard and valued.
And that requires trust, right?
Big time. And that trust is built on, open communication, honesty, and respect.
And I think it also requires a willingness to let go of control, to embrace the idea that the best solution might not be the one you initially had in mind.
Absolutely. It's about surrendering to the creative process, to the collective wisdom of the group.
And that can be really powerful.
Absolutely. Because when you tap into the collective genius of a group, you can achieve things that would be impossible to do alone.
All right, so we've covered 6 habits. We're proactive, we have a vision, we're prioritizing, we're thinking win-win, we're communicating effectively, and we're collaborating. What's left?
Well, all of that takes energy, right?
Yeah.
It takes sustained effort. And that's where the final habit comes in. Sharpen the saw.
I love the imagery here. It's like if you keep using a dull saw, you're eventually going to wear yourself out.
Exactly. This habit is all about renewal. It's
Right.
about taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually so that you have the energy and resilience to keep showing up and doing the work.
So, what does that look like in practice? Like, what are some concrete things we can do to sharpen our saws?
Well, physically, it's about taking care of your body.
Hmm.
Eating healthy, exercising, getting enough sleep, all the basics, but they're so important.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. Mentally, it's about keeping your